welcome to the 8th Madaxeman podcast in the lockdown series. Here, the usual gang of 6 is joined by Adam, all the way from the south coast, and we have our usual chat about painting. We talk about the later Carthaginian list under ADLG in a pretty epic session, which you're free to skip over if that's not your bag. We do tell you how long that takes, so you can skip forward. Then we actually, bizarrely, talk about what games we played this week, which is a rare departure. Andy's quiz music returns as well. And then finally we wrap up with a little look forward to what we might be painting over the next week or so. Sit back, enjoy the podcast.
This means war.
Okay, well, welcome to the unbelievable 8th edition of the Madaxeman podcast. And we're obviously getting overconfident here because we've extended the social circle or social bubble or whatever it's called if we're in New Zealand, which apparently is where this all comes from, to 7 people with a special guest all the way from the south coast of England. It's Mr., as it says here on Zoom, Mr. Adam's iPad. How are you?
Hello, I'm good, thank you very much. I'm hoping that Bournemouth is far enough away to count as social distancing, so that should be safe and healthy.
Well, from what I remember, it was sort of in the late 50s, so that probably counts in time-wise as much as anything else.
Both time and space.
Time and space, indeed. So what we'll do, we'll wade straight into it because with 7 people, we're probably stretching our own patience. Never mind all you poor sods who may be listening to this. So we'll dive straight into the big old question of what's been painted this week, and I'll go around my Zoom screen as usual and start off with Mr. Leroy Mayer and your Chinese chariots on your Zoom background.
Yeah. So the biggest thing I've completed this week is I've now finished my 15 mil Chinese chariots. So they're all from Eureka Miniatures, not Eureka. Museum Miniatures.
Museum, aren't they? Yeah, I can see them behind you.
Yeah. So they've come out quite nicely. So I've painted up 7 of them. So I've got 2 for generals. So they've got the generals. His chariot's more in red, so it's nice and obvious.
Right. Is that with the big umbrella on the back?
And a big umbrella because it's all about the parasol. And then the other chariots, I've managed to crowbar in the 2 pikemen or spearmen. So they look like proper 4-horse chariots.
Stab people. So did you manage to fit the general's ones onto slightly round bases or did you just go sod it? The umbrella's really obvious. We won't even go with this roundy stuff.
I managed to get the normal general on a 40 mil round with a parasol.
Wow. Was that all 4 horses or did he end up with a 2?
All 4 horses.
That's impressive.
There may have been some trimmage of various horse bases and all that to get them on the base properly.
Okay, so they're just rearing up on their hind legs and they just about fit.
Yeah, they work. Just don't look too closely or bend them very much.
Right. Okay, then they all did it. And has that been it for the week, or does that mean you've started? Because I saw you got some on our secret WhatsApp group. I saw that you'd done some shopping from. Or was it your stuff had arrived in the post from someone?
Yeah, my all my 7 Years War army from QRF Miniatures has now arrived. So I've spent the weekend
sort of
filing, cleaning, and getting more ready for base coating, which I was going to be doing today, but it's been blowing an absolute gale here in London.
No, it's been a right hoolie, hasn't it? All right. So we've got some Chinese done this week, and then towards the end of the podcast, we'll talk about next week, and we can actually delve into your thoughts on the quality of those QRF guys, and because it looked like there was a big old packet of them.
Yeah, it was a very healthy lockdown special.
Did you manage to get to the door before your better half to see the heft of the package?
I know it had gone through the miniature governance and procurement departments and was fully authorised.
Right. Okay. Well, I suppose lockdown is the one excuse where we can all do that, isn't it?
I'm just supporting local economies.
Okay. All right. That's reasonable. It looks like you're supporting some Scottish economy with a glass of something there as well.
Yep. Yeah, I've got a glass of Glenfarclas whiskey.
Well, I'm hopefully, if you're careful about how you say that, we can avoid having to press the profane content button, which I think limits the people who are allowed to listen to the podcast a little. Some people can filter it out. but I don't think they can filter it out for quality and interest, so it will still get through to someone. So going around the screen again then, Andy, what's your one word of the week? Is it Huskarls this week, or is it something else?
Well, it's 2 words, basically, Anglo and Danes. Here's some I made earlier in best Blue Peter fashion as a command base and a bunch of Huskarls.
Okay, so that command base looks like he's got a pretty big old kind of windsock fish type standard thing going on there.
That's right, yeah. So
is that a one piece casting, or is that sort of drilled hands and stuff like that?
No, just one piece casting from War and Empire.
Okay, all right, they're looking suitably Dark Age. And how many of those have you chewed through this week?
Well, I've done 6 bases of 3 units of these Huskarls, so they're now finished, and 1 command base. So I'm now on to the unarmored feared, which I'm in a state of non-preparedness. I've got 2 packs, which is about 50 figures, and they're kind of various poses. So I thought best do them all together so I can kind of mix and match the colours and the poses on each base, so they don't end up looking either too uniform or too completely random.
Okay, and are you just going to sort of cram, because they're heavy infantry, aren't they? So you're just going to do the same thing as you did before with 2 single ranks to mix them, or is this just a lump of spearmen and cram them all together?
No, this is just lumps of spearmen. So what I might do is I might do some of them single base, so that I can. I've got 1 packet of heavy spearmen. So depending on how many armoured spearmen units I want, I can either make them into 6 by hiding these guys in the second rank, or can basically, if I want everybody to be an unarmoured feared, I could hide the heavy spearmen and the armoured blokes at the back and put these in front.
Okay, so you could actually mix them up then and have some of those units more armoured and some not.
Yeah.
Okay, because I was saying with spearmen, actually, once you start getting to your ADLG mindset, you can probably get away with, depends how wide they are, sort of at least 7, or maybe sometimes even 6 on a heavy infantry base, and it still looks quite solid. Or are you going to try and squeeze out the full 8? Or
I think so. Yeah.
Try and do that. Okay then. All right. And then Adam, your special guest. You're up next. What's been happening in painting world of Adam this week?
Something slightly different rather than toy soldiers. I've been painting teeny tiny ships.
Teeny tiny ships. Is this Black Sails or no?
No,
else?
it's Alan's old Ironclad games. I've had them knocking around for a while, and I'm slowly getting through my backlog. So I've had 4 ships on the table, which I've painted. The painting's relatively simple. What makes it the annoying, complicated thing is doing the rigging.
Right. And what scale? Well, because I think all us Central Londoners know Alan's Ironclads game. I think it's official title for the unpublished version is Alan's Ironclads game. But what? Tell everybody about it. What actually is it? Or how does it work?
Well, each individual ship model, the scale is 1200 to 1. So each individual ship model, couple of inches. The Warrior's very big model, it might be up to 4 inches, so it's 2 to 4 inches. And each ship model's a unit.
Yeah.
And you give orders to the units, and they sail around and shoot at each other, and usually fail to do any damage. It's quite a long game.
Okay.
So are these mid-19th century ones?
Yeah. So from 1860 up to about 1890.
Yeah.
Right.
So there's no such thing as a standard design in those days. It was all very experimental and with
rams
and rifle guns and all sorts.
That's the reason why, as a game in a period of naval history, it's quite interesting, because before that and after it, everybody knew what a proper warship looked like. So all warships looked kind of like the same. Whereas for that 40 years or so, no one was quite sure. So they were like, we'll put a turret here and we'll put a ram there and we'll put a broadside. And they didn't know. So it's all a bit crazy. No. But most of them are still fully sailed. So it's doing the rigging, doing the little cotton ropes from one mast to another. That's the challenging bit.
My God, so how do you go about doing that? Because I've got that box of the starter set of Black Sails that is somewhere down the painting queue, and I've looked online, and there's various ways of doing the rigging, which basically boils down to, if you're a bit lazy, you use the pre-printed acetate sheet and just stick it on and squint. And if you're doing it properly, you buy like weird fretboards that you can do some sort of crochet thing with, and then glue them on.
Well, that's like, because you're talking about the ratlines, the sort of like
the ratlines, the 1700s, yeah.
you can just sort of cut them out and glue them on, which I don't actually bother. The rigging is the ropes from the ships and to the mast and from the mast to mast. That's actually worth doing because it does make the model stronger. So
Okay.
it helps it together. So there's Langton.
Designed to keep the mast up.
Yeah. Langton, which is a company that does very beautiful Napoleonic models. They've done a book of how to paint ships, and there's a few pages in there of how to put rigging on. So what I do is I sit there with that open, trying to follow it, swearing quite a lot, and slowly sort of like get it together.
And so is it just basic cotton, or is there a rigging colour scheme? Is it varied by nation? How geeky does this get?
Well, it can get very geeky. It's like they also sell special cotton thread, which I think is thinner than the actual cotton thread. So I've got some of that because it makes it easier. And in the book, it's like standing rigging, which is a rigging that doesn't move, is black, and running rigging that you put up and down sails is brown. Now, I'm just doing the standing rigging because, like, that's hard enough as it is. So I'm just sort of like doing that and doing it sort of like as well as I can. And it's I've got a pin vise drill bit, and the drill bit I've got to use is 0.5 millimeters thick. This is how sort of like it gets. But
and how many drill bits do you break per ship?
On average, about one every couple of ships.
Right.
I did buy quite a few the last time I found a shop that sold them.
So is this like real life shipbuilding, and it takes you about 3 years to do one?
Well, it's like the painting's not too bad because it's like I'm going with the paint them to get them on the table theory. Because I don't know if you've ever seen people that do this size of ship really, really well. And it's astounding the technical brilliance that some people can do of painting these models. Now, I'm nowhere near that. I'm painting to get them on the table. So the painting's not too bad. And the rigging, I'm sort of like doing one an evening. It might take me between 1 and 2 hours.
But Adam, what's the pacing like when you have to go and put it in the bottle?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that would be a good one. And what are you drinking as well then? That looks like a...
Oh, the other thing, what I'm drinking is, I'm drinking
rum.
Bass, for two reasons. Firstly, because it always makes me think of Coopers, Coopers and Burton, and because it's £1 a bottle from Asda, and it's a decent beer.
That's a very good result.
You had me at £1 a bottle.
Yeah.
But more importantly, with the painting, as well as painting that, I've been teaching my children to paint because they're having to homeschool. So I've got a box of Perry's Medieval French, and they're sticking them together and gluing them together. Because as you haven't got children, you probably don't realise this, Tim, but the English national curriculum doesn't have toy soldier painting on it at all.
No.
Which is shocking, I know.
I wish I'd known that before the election.
But it does have 3D printing to make the charade.
Well.
It's the fridge now.
Well, that's it. So there's a crossover moment coming then for education. That could be it. So how are they doing? Have they got a particular livery they fancy, or?
They're being somewhat creative with their colour, which is I'm pointing like blue, green, sort of like keeping it together, and the leather's leather and the metal's metal. But they're enjoying it. They're making it look good, and we're just doing the white undercoat, blocking it out, doing a dip. So
how old are your kids, Adam?
The girl's 8. I should know this, shouldn't I? The girl's 8.
You do know this. I'll edit this out. It's fine. Or we'll just hope your wife is never going to listen to all the way through this. It's fine.
Yeah. And the boy's 11. So they're still at the learning to keep your hand steady stage, which is absolutely fine.
Which is beyond many of us, really, I think, still, even now.
This means war.
So Tamsin, by the looks of it, you've been also, probably to a slightly marginally higher standard, I'm suspecting, doing some Perry mounted figures, which you've got as your Zoom background as well. So how's, I was going to say, are they finished, which I can clearly see in front of me, but what's been your kind of learnings of the week of finishing the mounted figures and getting them on the horses?
Well, let's say, sort of from the same background, that's first 12 of the mounted finished. I've got another 12, almost finished. Just need to do the flocking on the bases. That'll be tomorrow morning. And I've got the last batch of riders. Good way through painting them. Should finish those tomorrow, and then it'll be another day, a couple more days for basing.
And how did you find those Perry riders? Because I think I've got some, and I think the ones in armour are kind of good, but I don't know how much filling. Sometimes there's a little tiny bit of filling around the bits where the arms join on or stuff like that, and I'm never quite sure whether that's me filling something that doesn't need to be filled, or whether they just need a teeny tiny bit of it just sometimes, because I'm bad at gluing the stuff together.
I didn't do any filling,
okay.
And that shows on a couple of bits. Looking at the horses in that in the photo, I should really have filled and sanded sort of the seam line on the rump of the horses.
Yeah.
But it doesn't show particularly. Isn't as too obvious. So
yeah, I think they do go, because I think the thing with the Perrys, they have designed the arms and the sort of shouldery bits with different bits of armour, so that the seam line is sort of part of the way the figure works quite well.
The pauldrons certainly cover most of the gaps, so you don't really need to fill too much there.
Yeah, okay. And have you done any of the barded horses then as well, the armoured ones from that pack? Was that next?
A second.
Oh, right, that's next up as well. Oh, running away into the background and picking up something from a wall of Perry horses. And here we go. Yep, there's the barded. With that range of European horse colours that we discussed the other week as well, all ready to go. So has there been anything else that's kind of snuck onto the paint table that's gotten a bit of a side project this week? Or?
Not this week. Basically, got so close to the end that decided, no, ignore anything else.
Yeah, just nail it. Just plough through. Okay, all right. And what are you drinking this week?
Talisker Sky.
Talisker Sky. Is that very peaty?
Yes, it is quite. Well, like all Sky malts, it's quite peaty.
I'm talking about that with just using the word peaty, because I know that is sometimes applied to whiskey. Really,
so you've got peaty, smoky flavour on it. It's not quite as much on that way as the Talisker Storm.
Okay. So Sky as in the sky, as opposed to Sky the island.
No,
Sky as in the island. That you get Sky and Storm.
Okay, and Storm is another island.
I think there are others. I think there are a couple.
The Storm's a daily weather there.
Okay, and then there's Storm Away. Summer. No, that's something else. Well, before we go down that rabbit hole, Dave, let me guess. You look like, from that fixed, almost pained expression, that you've got some samurai being done.
No.
Camels. My God, it's not samurai.
So the samurai needed more back banners, and Fighting 15s have got them in the post, so I'm just waiting for them to arrive. So I've gone on to your side project, and I'm doing War and Empire, Forged in Battle, what do you want to call them, camels. So there's 1, 2, 3, 6 bases of camels.
Wow.
So it's a bit of a completing the camel corps, if you know what I mean.
Don't get slaughtered by the zeros.
So there's 3 bases of camel bow and 3 bases of camel spear, impetuous, I suppose they'll be, and a couple of bases of light camels, basing like that.
What's this different? So with camels, because obviously we've all got a few camels, but one of the challenges I've always found with them is, how do you choose the colours for camels? Do you do them all the same kind of beigey, or do you go for different eclectic colours? And I think I had a big set of Lancashire Games camels that I did all sorts of weird browns and quite different, and I'm not convinced it actually looked right. It's a bit like that thing about most elephants are sort of dirty brown, but you want to paint them grey, because if you don't paint them grey, they look weird. What have you done with camel colours? Where have you gone with that?
So I've painted them green ochre, which is a standard colour. Yeah, green ochre. So it's not exactly desert yellow or anything like that. So it's I don't know, green ochre. I've got it here. Where is it? Hold on there. Yeah, so it's basically green ochre. So it's a sort of.
It's about sandy brown, basically.
Yeah, but it's a bit darker, and then
with a bit of orange.
To that is I've actually inked.
Is that a Vallejo colour?
Vallejo, yeah. Or Vallejo, or whatever. So it's Vallejo. Here we go. It's Vallejo number God, doesn't even say 119.
119.
I've got a whole load of different sands and things because I was painting up some Sudan British a couple last year.
Okay.
For a game for that the Men Who Would Be King.
Mm.
So these have been grey and ochre, and then they've been inked brown.
Okay.
Hope Arms dark brown, and then I've painted back over with a green ochre or maybe something slightly paler to give it a bit of depth.
Yep.
You know, if they've got beards and that, but no, they're all the same colour.
Oh, right.
I did think about going for different colours, but I thought that's getting really complicated. But sprayed them black, and then I've sort of like done quite a thick, not really dry brush, but I've done white jalabas, coats or whatever over the top, leaving some black underneath, which pulls out the detail. So they look good.
Okay. So it's a kind of a bit of a quicker style than doing the samurai then.
Yeah, a lot quicker than doing the samurai. Quicker than doing the samurai.
All right. Okay. And then Peter, you're. Oh, sorry. No. I've almost missed Dave's booze conversation, and he's waving some wheelie juice.
Wheeze the juice. It's the beer 52 thing again.
Wheeze juice. Wheeze the juice.
Wheeze the juice. They brought a load over from America.
Okay.
It's imported to the UK by Beer 52.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, it might be sat in the box that I've got downstairs. It's yeah. By the way, we do actually both pay for this. Nobody's sending us any free stuff for this whatsoever. It'd be lovely if they did, but we could keep bagging on about stuff. But nothing. Nobody's actually listened to this and sent us anything whatsoever, which is a minor detail. So what's the wheeze juice then? Wheeze juice.
They're all American this week.
Yeah.
Month. This month.
Okay.
Not week. No, not this day.
Right. Obviously quite strong then.
Yeah, well, they all are, aren't they? So this is 6.2, I think. So I'm giggling already.
Yeah.
It's all right. It says juicy IPA, double dry hops for maximum flavour with Mandarina, Bavaria, Eldorado, and Cascade hops.
Right, I think I've seen that army list, but I don't think the troops quite work together properly, do they? So Peter, you were doing Austrians. I think last week you'd sprayed everything white, and then I presume, are they all done now? All 8 million of them?
Yeah, all 8 millions of like 100 plus infantry and 20 odd plus horses. So finally finished them off. Used the long weekend to finish off the basing. Had a nice finishing off of that. So that was Sunday morning, nice and relaxing. Get them all done. And now I'm moving on to the Austrians that have a little bit more colour, such as the Grenadiers and things like that. Hungarian Grenadiers with blue trousers. I get to use more colours.
Whoa. And you know, as it always seems the traditional question on anything to do with Napoleonic, base sizes, number of figures per base, and then we can all disagree with you. Just
yes,
the form,
absolutely.
just the standard.
Well,
yeah.
Because the Austrians end up doing large units very quickly, it was starting to get ridiculous because I've got AB miniatures. So I've gone for the 40 mil frontage, but instead of doing the 8 for the 40 by 30, I've done 6 on it.
Okay.
Because it seems to work quite nicely. So I've kept the 3 cavalry on for those bases because they work quite nicely. But the I think it works quite nicely. I know other people are saying it should be 4 and this and the other, but works.
Okay. Well, I suppose if you pay for AB, you want to be able to see them all the way round, really, don't you?
Yeah.
It's like
Absolutely.
otherwise it's kind of a waste of the cash. Okay.
Absolutely.
And has there been any sneaky side projects this week, or have just the Austrians consumed you with their sheer numbers?
I just wanted to plough through and actually get the units finished. So they'd been sat there staring at me. So now they've been varnished twice. They've got the basing done and flocked and everything else. It's just nice to complete something, that sense of completion of actually finishing something off, and even while we're still locked away.
And then you can do the other half of it next week.
And then I've ordered a load more.
Oh, even better. Fantastic. So that's good for Ian at Fighting 15s then, isn't it? That's
one of my favourite
Yeah,
facts about the Napoleonic army, Napoleonic Austrian army, is in 1809, when Napoleon was busy elsewhere, the Austrians invaded Bavaria and tried to catch the French army there by surprise. And some of their troops were marching on the north bank of the Danube instead of the south. And it took that corps 7 days to cover 63 miles when they were advancing. when they were retreating, it took them 2 days.
Okay, so the table's got a bit of a slope on it then, quite possibly.
Very well motivated.
Motivated. Okay, all right. I think I've had another bizarrely eclectic week, and but before I do, I better crack open. This time I've got Inhaler Hoppy Pale Ale from Magic Rock in glamorous Huddersfield. So this isn't quite one of the American ones. It's kind of one of those pale ales that, in the way of modern kind of beers, it is still slightly cloudy. It looks okay when you're pouring it out, but it ends up with a little bit of crunchy stuff at the bottom. But I ended up liking this one and actually buying more than just the standard 6 that it provides for you. Oh, sorry, the standard free set that come at random. I bought these myself. So here we go. Oh, yeah, that is price and hoppy. That's pretty decent. But I've done another bizarrely eclectic week. So what have I done? I did finished up yet another 28mm gnome, which I have to thank Andy for possibly, you know, we could probably have a vote on this, possibly the first actual acceptable non-groan worthy pun that Andy has ever wheeled out, which is a miracle. And it's Gnome Wall Jackson, a small American Civil War gnome in grey uniform, which doesn't quite show with this video background. So if you start eclectic with a 28mm gnome, that's quite straightforward. Just done with a black undercoat and then grey, and then some of the real dark wash over it to give it some depth. And then I also painted up, or didn't paint up as such, an island with a lighthouse. An island with a lighthouse. So I think I got this in that enormous sort of 6mm collection of modern stuff that you may have seen go on eBay that me and my brother used to have when we were both in short trousers. And he ended up collecting loads of odds and sods of buildings and things. So there's this lighthouse, which is an ornament from Cape Cod, with a lighthouse and 2 houses either side of it. So this presumably is a famous lighthouse in Cape Cod in Massachusetts. So rather than chuck it away, it looked about the right scale. So I'd mounted it on a tiny, well, about a 3 or 4 inch bit of MDF, and built it up and put some sand on it. So it's going to be an island for when I end up doing these sort of Black Seas ships that I've got the box set that I've not even opened yet and not really looked at. And then I also ended up trying to work out what the next painting project would be and not really wanting to dive into anything too substantial. So I opened the packet of, not Two Dragons, a Blue Moon Swiss pikeman that I picked up from Old Glory in the States when I was out at Cold Wars, just before lockdown started. So I got one of their bags, which has got 12, 24, 30 figures in. So I managed to eat that into 2 12-man pike blocks and a 6-man halberdier unit, because I was kind of 1 pike block short and 1 halberdier short in my 15mm Swiss. But these Blue Moon guys they're really nice. They're really clean figures, but they're not. They're almost sort of too clean, and they are very definitely 18mm. You know, they advertise themselves as 18mm, and they're very definitely 18mm. They're a lot bigger than the 15s from Merleton and the 15s from QRF as well. So and they've all got, or nearly all got, flat sort of beret type caps. So when you paint them up from above, it looks like you're kind of looking into a packet of M&Ms or something like that with different hats, whereas the other ones have got more sort of helmets and things. And in an experiment, which I think was more just an experiment than anything scientific, I used some plastic rod to do the pikes instead of trying to do it with metal ones. So I got some 0.8mm polystyrene round rod for £2 or something off eBay from, I presume it's a model railway thing, and cut that down. The theory being sort of twofold. First of all, it makes them slightly bendy, which means that you're less likely, well, they're not as sharp as steel ones, so you're not going to impale yourself. It makes them slightly bendy, so in theory they can flex a bit before they break or ping out of the guy's hands. And then I also found something again online on a website about how to put points onto the end of them. So because the rod is so plasticky, you can squeeze the end of it flat in a pair of pliers, with as long as the pliers have got flat inner faces, and it sort of squishes out the end of the rod a little bit, such that you can then get a craft knife and trim it into a point. So you almost get an actual pike point effect, rather than the brass rod that I was using. Just ended up with like the pole had an end, and the end of the pole was silver.
But I've done with brass rod. If you hit it with a hammer to flatten it out, and then you can file it to a point, so it's possible to do something similar.
That is something, but I'm just too bloody lazy to do the filing. I think
But it's also got the advantage, though, of it is quite painful if you accidentally lean on them.
Right, yeah, which is again not a problem for these, but I have a suspicion that the 0.8 mil rod, it looks about right. It would look great if it was wire, but I think it might be too thin for the plastic, because I've already had one of them actually snap. So they bend up to a point, but the point at which they're glued into the guy's hands, they've sort of snapped. And the other thing you can't really do with it is with wire, when with pikemen, you've got the lower hand that's normally the pole sort of pushes through, so the pike butts onto the floor, but you've normally got to push a metal pole through the lower hand, and then it sort of sits in the upper one. And with the plastic rod, you obviously can't do that. It's just not strong enough to force open a hole that's already there, and they're a bit of a bugger to drill. So, these guys are all holding the pikes with the butt of the pike in their lower hand. So they look fine. I'm happy with them, and I've done them with black lining as well. But because they're big, simple figures, and all my other Swiss were black lined, so I black lined these. So with the colours, they look a bit like is it a Mondrian painting? That one where it's just a big blocks of colour. These look really, really. Is that going to show? Possibly. They look really, really big there with that sort of colour effect on it. So that's a partial success, but at least I can claim to have done some modelling and crafting with that. And then I just didn't finish off the French. I finished off a couple of weeks ago, but I uploaded them onto the website this weekend as well. And so I claim the credit for doing some painting that I actually finished a couple of weeks ago, but posted pictures of those 10mm Napoleonics onto quite a lot of places. So it's been another random eclectic-y week. And then one more thing, I did 3 shields of Dark Age cavalry, the ones that I'd done last week, and then realized I hadn't put shields on them. So they were all riding their horses with one hand kind of waving in the air, and the other one holding the spear. So I did those as well. So 3 shields. And you
gave Peggy a nose job.
Exactly, 3 shields, a gnome from the American Civil War, 15mm pikemen, and an island.
So basically what you're telling us, Tim, is what you really need to do is buy another army. Because you're doing all this eclectic stuff, you need to do another army.
It's a nightmare. It's like posting all this.
Which Napoleonic army are you going to pick?
Exactly. And, I've sort of posted...
Random.org.
No, there isn't that many, though, is there? It's but I post links to the French onto a number of different websites, and I think at some point, somebody has replied to all of those threads going, when are you going to do the next army? And I'm going, well, I am at some point, but I'm trying to pretend to myself I'm not.
It's just a cry for help when you're doing all these eclectic ones. You just know.
And Pendragon brought out some new Peninsular War Rangers literally last week, and it was like, just in time. So I'm pretending I'm not going to buy another 10mm French army, another 10mm Napoleonic army just yet. But I'll kind of come to that a bit later when we talk about some other stuff. So
this means war.
Okay then, and we're now into the Art de la Guerre list building part of the podcast. I think I'll endeavour to work out how long this bit does and add in a bit in case this is not your bag, and so you can skip to the end of it and miss this bit out if you wish. Yes, indeed, we did end up talking for quite a while about the Carthaginians. It's a very complex list, a lot of options and an interesting discussion, but if ADLG is not your thing, feel free to skip forward to about 1 minute 25 in this podcast, and then we'll be back with the normal rubbish. This is our first list. Well, this last week we ended up with random.org pulling out a really classic kind of interesting list, Hannibal's Carthaginians. There's 2 Carthaginian lists in the Art de la Guerre book, number 54 and number 55. And this one is the proper Hannibal +5 command, which is big command values for Art de la Guerre. You can have a strategist, which is obviously Hannibal, to do that a bit more. And this is the army of the crossing of the Alps, the fighting against Rome, and ultimately the defeat in North Africa by Scipio. So there's actually quite a lot of almost, I guess, historical precedent and background to this list, and there's several different theatres of war with different troop types in it. So random.org, I think, has definitely done us all a favour by picking a list that potentially can be built in a lot of different ways. So we're going to kind of run through, and I think we've got an extra special guest list as well that Dave's actually going to chip in with 2. But I think we'll start with Peter's, which we've got up on the screen share here. So Peter, talk us through the elements in this list, how the initiative works, how the command works, and what you see each of these commands actually doing on table.
Right. Well, what I've done is tried to do something a little bit different. With the 3 commands, the way I've based it around is I've got 2 cavalry commands. One which has got the couple of elite heavy cavalry and 2 elite light cavalry javelins. So they're the ability to overwhelm one wing. That's the aim of them. Either suck up a lot more troops in comparison to them, or go in, hit hard, and overwhelm a wing. I've included the commander.
And sorry, you're seeing those almost operating together then?
The cavalry and the heavy cavalry and the light cavalry javelin.
Okay.
That one command, yes. I've got another wing, which is light cavalry javelin and 2 medium cavalry, which basically I've got a ordinary included unreliable general. So that's either going to be slowing someone down just by having a cloud of 4 light cavalry javelin, or using it on a flank attack, depending on what the terrain is.
Yeah, because six gets you quite wide, doesn't it? You can actually almost outflank a command on table with six troops.
Yeah, absolutely. So it just depends on have they tried to restrict down the table, with a C and everything else. If they've done that, then I might use it as a flank. But
actually, just thinking wide. before we kind of carry, I think with all of these lists, and it's a question that I got online during the week. I think there's an implicit assumption that all of these lists are largely fighting in period with when we're building together, because you can go down a bit of a rabbit hole of, have I got an answer to knights and things like that. But I suspect all of the lists, there's an implicit assumption that they're fighting broadly historical enemies. Certainly if it's an early army like this, they're not getting into the period when there's knights and other stuff in the Middle Ages. But yeah, sorry, carry on, Peter. Carry on telling us how these two work in period.
Well, so because of that, and because of the cavalry that they'll be up against, which is mostly sort of heavy cavalry or medium cavalry, there's not a lot of impact bow in there. So they've actually got a good chance to go up against them, especially with all the javelin. And then going on to, you've got those two covering the wings either which way. Because you've got the numbers built up there, we end up with 29 units. Because the central command, I've got a strategist. I've got the heavy swordsman impetuous, so you've got 6 of those going forward. You've got a couple of African spearmen, heavy spearmen, so I can mix those up a little bit. And then I've got a couple of medium swordsman impact. So that depends on what the terrain is in front. So either I have the medium swordsman impact on the wings, or I have it's going to go through some terrain. The key thing, though, and this is the hidden bit, is that people won't take seriously all the light infantry. But with this list, you can have elite light infantry. So I've got 6 light infantry javelin elite. I've got 3 slingers elite. And so I can have that cloud coming up. And because of the strategist, I can actually hold back the heavy swordsman impetuous, have the light infantry go forward, wipe out their light infantry, because it's going to overwhelm and take over someone else. And if someone puts down mountains, then fantastic, even better. But basically what I'm trying to do is force their heavy swordsman or their medium swordsman to come to me. Because I'm impetuous, the rules are if I go in against swordsman, I don't get my impetuous, but if they charge me, I do get my impetuous. And by having all these light infantry in front, there's not going to be a lot of troops that are armored. And with them being elite light infantry, you can actually angle them and everything else. So it's almost like a whole line of bowmen in front shooting at the opposition. All I need to chip them down is one each. And that's going to be a massive difference when they finally come in.
I must admit, I've never seen that many light infantry in a single command. That's really, really wild, isn't it? And in fact, would you, just looking at that, would you have been tempted to go maybe for the fourth slinger and go down to 5 light infantry javelin? Because then that would give you a smidge more ranged shooting to try and ping away at people. And I guess 5 light infantry is still going to be better than most other people's.
Yeah,
that would work.
I was thinking about it. It actually is a list I fancy trying out, because I just fancy that when you put that on the table, they usually dismiss the light infantry just as a an hors d'oeuvre in between the fighting. But once you've taken out their light infantry and you're actually using your strategist to hold back your impetuous troops and are constantly chipping away at them, the frustration will either force them to attack you, or you're there just forcing them to take the hits. And hopefully by that point, I've had my heavy cavalry, a couple of elite heavy cavalry with the light javelins come round, or on the other wing, the 4 light cavalry javelin with the medium cavalry has either frustrated or done the flanking to really start chipping and taking people down.
Yeah,
so
with
that's
29,
what I'm aiming to do.
Yeah, with 29 units in the army, actually you can lose every single bit of non-lights, can't you? Presuming all the lights don't get injured. You've got 15 light infantry and light horse, and you've only got 14 combat troops as such. So that is new. And you avoided the temptation of the elephant then?
It was mediocre. So it was like it would just be a target practice. So if someone does bring on elephants, which people are tempted in this period as well, I have got an absolute bucket load of javelins. So the other temptation with this list is the terrain in this is plain, but some of the armies you're up against, so you can attack them in the mountains, for instance, and this list would be fantastic in that, because then, especially if they've got elephants, you can dismount the light cavalry to be javelin as well. So you can actually have a cloud of light infantry javelin to really frustrate and upset someone.
Yeah, that aggression of 4 is going to give you a lot of control over terrain, isn't it? Huge.
Yeah.
Wow.
You can really, force what the terrain is, how it breaks out, and then depending on who you're up against, really take advantage of the strengths of the army.
Okay. Any comments from the gallery on what's kind of an unusual army? Dave, are you?
I'd say something here, because it's actually really close to Tommy's list, which I thought was unusual as well. Because Tommy's list has got.
We'll come into Tommy's list after this. Then let's do that.
Yeah, exactly. Because he's got a list which I was surprised at, because it's got a huge number of light foot and light horse, and Tommy's list comes in at 27, which is very similar in size. He's gone for the elephant.
Let's pop. Let's see if I can pop that one up on screen then. Where was that one? Is it this one? Possibly. Does this look like the one with all the... No, yes, that's got a lot of sling.
No. That's got 27.
Is that yours?
I think that might be mine.
Is that the one?
The previous one had 27, Tim, so maybe that's it.
I think it's this one, isn't it? 27, yeah. It's
this one. That's the one. Apologies, okay. Yes, that's the one.
Wow, okay.
So he's got the elephant. And the difference there is he's got the elephants.
Yep.
Which is kind of opposed to Pete's 6 impetuous guys. So he's got elephants and impetuous swordsmen in a big group and he's got 4 spearmen. I think he's actually a bit heavier on the actual combat troops. And the ally has got another elephant. The thing I found interesting was he's got lots of light horse and he's got lots of elite light foot.
Yeah, that's the same thing, going big on the elite light foot. So this one's got, so just looking at this one, so if we compare it to Peter's, your first command, Peter, had the heavy cavalry and 2 light horse. This is a pure light horse skirmishing command. This is just 3 light horse. So this is the first command here is probably closer to your third command. You had 2 mediums, 4 lights. This is just 3 lights. So that's a pure delaying command quite small.
So I'm expecting something like that. So that's why I'd want to sort of either of those are going to overwhelm the normal sort of like just couple of light horse.
Yeah, so your commands are to beat a command like this. Then the other flank command, where you had, I guess, 2 heavy cavalry and 2 light horse. This has got 4 light horse, which is 2 of them elite, which is pretty pokey again, and then a javelinman Death Star with the mediocre elephant and 2 javelinmen. So that'd be an interesting matchup for your 2 heavy cavalry or your 2 mediums, wouldn't it?
It would, especially with the elephant in there. So either it's just a hold off one because the heavy cavalry is an impact, so you can keep evading.
True.
And I'd have 2 elite javelin anyway. So it's either you evade and then have from the center command a couple of javelin peel off, or keep them on the elephants in the central one. But either way, I'm going to overwhelm one wing and hold off on the other one.
Yeah, I suppose as opposed to this one where that elephant, javelinman Death Star on the flank command can actually go into infantry, because both of your flank commands were very much go around the sides, whereas this one can go into it, but the flip side, it doesn't have the cavalry thing. So in the middle here, whereas you had the 6 impetuous heavy swordsmen and the 2 spearmen really, and then a couple of mediums as well, this has gone for a mega Death Star. I guess is 3 of the elephants, 3 impetuous Gauls. So that is absolutely going forwards, isn't it? That's rolling 6 wide of stuff.
And it's got a crowd of elite light foot to protect the elephant, the mediocre elephants.
Yeah, there's 6 of them, isn't there? There's 6 light foot in front of it.
Lightfoot dies. There's plenty more light foot in there. Those elephants are going to get into anything without being damaged.
And then the block of 4 spearmen in the rest of that command. So looking at this is, you've got a mega Death Star, 3 elephants, 3 Gauls, big screen of Lightfoot, and then you've got almost a separate command of 4 heavy spearmen.
Yeah, and a strategist to control it all.
Because Tommy's done what I view as a smart thing with the light infantry, this one's going to be hard because, as you say, the elephant are going to get in there and probably undamaged. It'd be hard to actually shift them because he's going to end up similar number of light infantry as I have.
Actually, you could even with this one, you could peel a couple of the spearmen off and use them to support that cavalry wing, because if you're skirmishing with the light horse and you stick a couple of spearmen there, the strategist can drive them over to the wing, and that's going to slow down and neutralize someone else's light horse as well, while this mega Death Star and 4 elephants in the army with I guess that must be a Numidian ally at the end, just kind of barrels into people. Wow. Okay.
But the problem I have with the elephants, though, with them being mediocre, if you do get in to shoot at them, it's they're going to get shot.
No, definitely. But I think with six elite light infantry in front of them, that's probably a reasonable solution.
2 or 3 you can sacrifice of his elite light foot. That's not going to happen.
Yeah, it's going to take them a long time to die, and there's not much bow fire in this period, I guess. But it's an interesting similar thing with a lot, that choice of a lot of them. And this is 27, and you've got 6 Lightfoot, 3, 7 light horse. So you've got nearly half the army as lights in this one as well. So,
and you've got an initiative of 5, which means you're definitely going to win the terrain.
Yeah, that's
and
amazing.
choose to attack into the opponent's terrain.
No, that's the thing.
That's
Okay.
the problems with the
Can I ask
carpet
Pete?
one.
Can I ask Pete a question on his army?
Yep, let's go flip back to Pete's. Yep.
Pete, because you've spent an awful lot of point on the skirmishers, and even the cavalry is fairly unpokey cavalry. And I get the theory about getting the hits in before the fight happens, but do you think your actual fighting battle troops, they're just big enough and wide enough when push comes to shove to sort of like stand in line and take it? Because they might be in trouble of just being outflanked on either side and being beaten up in the actual real fight.
You see, I was thinking about that, and it's a very good point, but you've still got 6, 7, 8, 10. It's still 10 wide of actual front line troops. So normally that's pretty good for most things. And because I decided to go for the heavy swordsman as opposed to the medium, So it sort of wards off any sort of cavalry just coming in for the easy hits against the mediums. I understand what you meant. I went back and forth. I did actually have 4 spearmen at one point and less the lights, but I thought I'd step it up. It'd be interesting to try it. It's just from some of the games I've played, if you go too wide, then you end up being restricted by heavies by the actual terrain itself.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I suppose there's still, that middle command with the strategist. It's one of those classic commands that is 2. So you've got 6 heavy swordsmen impetuous, which is a decent sized command. And then you've got 2 spearmen and 2 medium sword impact as well, which is not bad in its own right. And you ally that with either of the cavalry, you've got 2 blocks of 6. But yeah,
I think it's going to boil down to, as you're saying, Adam, it's going to boil down to, can I have 2 commands going in and the third command just holding someone off? And that's what I'm expecting one of the commands to do. That if I can hold off, like if Tommy's turning up with elephants in one command, is that one I'm going to be holding off, and I get to overwhelm the other one, and I get my 2 commands, the strategist and the wing one coming in. Perhaps that's how it works. It'd be interesting to try it out. I'm just not sure on the shooty stuff. That's the thing, that either it's going to win it and they won't be turning up with that much light infantry, or it's like Tommy turns up and that sort of like idea that Brian gets neutered.
Yeah, no, I think it's an interesting one. I think both these lists really use the strategist well, because they're using those extra points to command an awful lot of stuff, which I guess you need to do.
This means war.
Adam, what about your list? Talk us through your list, what the 3 commands are and what each of them does.
Okay, I've gone for a different thing to Pete, but one thing I think Pete's done well, and one thing I thought was, with Carthaginian, it's very easy to have an army of lots of bits, a bit of this, a bit of that, a bit of that, and you end up with nothing much. So where he went with all the shooting type stuff, I see that theory, but I went with another idea. So I went with Hannibal, because you've got to have Hannibal.
You've got to have Hannibal, yeah, that's mandatory, isn't it, really?
That's kind of the point. So I went with Hannibal's command. I had the 4 African spear, which are armoured and elite. I had 2 Italian companions, heavy swords, impact armoured, and 2 Spanish Scutari medium impact. So I've got 6 foot there that I would be happy to probably take on anything in period. They'll walk forward and fight anything, really. I've also got 4 skirmishes in that command, because just to get shot at by Pete's troops, really. And the 2 Spanish, the medium impact, they're either a reserve, or if there's some rough terrain next to that command, they go on the end to make it 8 wide, fightingness. So that command just walks forward and fights anything, really. That's it's a heavy duty command, goes forward, fights anything. The next command is, I think, what a lot of people have done, 2 light horse and 2 medium cavalry. They're the occupy space, mess around. 2 medium cavalry might be able to do something, but they're the skirmishy command. And the other command, I was thinking, shall I go cavalry heavy? But I didn't. I went with 2 medium cavalry and 2 light horse, and a brilliant general. This is a brilliant general. 2 medium cavalry and 2 light horse to do the same job on the other side, but also 4 medium impact Gauls, which again, in rough terrain, especially with the 2 Spanish Scutari, 6 of them in rough terrain, there is nothing they're going to face in rough terrain that they're going to be scared of. So the idea is use the strategist and the initiative to make sure I get a good patch of rough halfway up the table. And then I go in with 6 heavy foot, 6 very good heavy foot wide, and 6 very good medium foot wide. And I shunt forwards and I fight what's ever in front of me. And the light horse and the medium cav sort of like mess around on the flanks to make sure the flank doesn't collapse. There's 24 in the army. And as long as I don't lose the skirmishers and the medium and light horse, that means all my fighting troops have got to die. So the plan is just really good battle troops. They walk forwards, and they fight what's in front of them, because the elite troops and the armoured troops, especially with Hannibal to rally them, should be able to win the game with attrition.
Okay, because that was going to be my question on it. From that, Peter's got the irregular impetuous swordsman, and Tommy's army list had the a lot of elephants in it to use the strategist, and had a lot of troops. I was just thinking that your strategist command was actually all sort of quite controllable, and it was wider than 6 for sure, because the two mediums operate independently, but it was a little bit, it sort of felt a little bit maybe controllable. It didn't feel like it was entirely using the command and control, but you're using it more to get, with the other 4 impact foot in the other command, the strategist control over terrain is really important, and you're thinking get them in early, get a war of attrition, do some rallying.
So question for you, Adam. How's your experience been, because you've got one command which is all medium troop, haven't you, from what you just said? Is that correct?
Well, medium and cavalry and light horse,
yeah, because I've had mixed results with having that sort of group, because the medium foot just by itself, I like using them as wingmen, but medium foot themselves, as you're saying, you need the terrain. Without the terrain, they end up being, I don't know, fodder. It might be the way I'm using them, but I've been caught out a few times.
Well, I think that's true, but my experience of ADLG isn't as much as most people that we're talking with. But I think it's fair to say that, especially with a strategist, you're going to end up with a good patch of rough in the right place. And even if you're not, as long as they're not fighting mounted troops, although they only get 3 hits, they're impact swordsmen. So even against heavy troops, they're not disastrously bad. Yeah. So they'll get rolled over by cataphracts. But if the worst comes to the worst, as long as they're fighting enemy heavy foot, they'll stand up.
I think also in period, and obviously in period is a flexible thing, but the Carthaginians are sort of in that Hellenistic successor a little bit earlier before that. You don't really tend to encounter much other than the usual, 1 to 3 companions. You don't see very much impact mounted in this period. You don't see many cataphracts. So in period, I don't think impact medium foot are quite as vulnerable as once you start to get into the later period, when there's loads more lancers and cataphracts and things just marching around. So, but it is a grey area about when that definition of in period ends, really. But yeah, I don't think they're quite as vulnerable early doors as they would be later. Okay, interesting. So that's get it stuck in, win a war of attrition, and win through pushing through a big bit of rough terrain on the flanks as well. Okay, right, Dave. I'll flip to your list now. We've got this one up on screen, which looks, looking at it straight away, looks completely different. That's intriguing.
Well, I think this is. I think if Julian, our good friend Julian, is listening to this, he'd be having an embolism, because I'm looking at Pete's list, Tommy's list. Julian's got this policy that you need to have so many breakpoints in an army, and that's kind of something I think. But I also had some other thoughts. I wanted the strategist. I wanted it to be in Italy, because I thought then you got the impact Gauls, which gives you a lot more control of the army. So I've gone for a very, very, very heavy foot-based army. But then when I've played this army, I've always been using Alexandrian. And like you were saying, when I've always sat there and gone, right, I've won the initiative. And then I've sat there, watched the army go down, and then I thought, right, my companions are going around one end of the table, and they're going to thump. And it's always worked out. Hello, Daryl Pierce. I've done this to you a couple of times, I'm afraid to say. So what I thought, I needed something which will try and control against that sort of command. And that's where the strategist is. So you've got an elephant with Scutari, who are medium swordsman impact. And you've got some elite slingers to protect the elephant. Again, I've gone with an extra one, so that you've got, if one dies, you've still got one there protecting the mediocre. There's 2 heavy cavalry elite and 2 Numidians elite. Now, I think that command can actually deal with a companion command. And that allows you then to overwhelm the rest of the opponent's army with the heavy swordsman impacts, the heavy spearman armor, and that command. Yeah.
So this is super light on mounted then for this army. You've only got the 2 heavy cavalry.
I think the mounted suck in this army because someone is going to come with an Alexandrian army with impact heavy cavalry. So you either go for a command with all the Punic cavalry and have like 6 of them and go incredibly heavy to try, or you just don't bother, and you hope you get them. You hope you get the terrain to control it. The initiative is very good, and one thing I really like with this army is you've got 3, 4, 5. So you've got 7 heavy foot in first command across, and then you've got some medium foot to keep the enemy on the go, so they can operate around the edges. That's my thought on that. I like to have heavy foot going forward, but with some medium foot which can go round the edges to get into the flanks.
Yeah, because you've actually got 17 combat troops and only 5 lights in here, which is completely the other way around to other people. So is this, given that you don't have cavalry and light horse for both flanks, you've actually got a kind of a mini cavalry command, also commanded by the strategist who's got a kind of Death Star with him. Yeah. That's all your cavalry. Does that mean you're really angling for a waterway or a river or a big chunk of terrain to try and narrow the table down for this?
I think so. Then run the spearman armor down the waterway with the Gauls on the inside of them for a bit of impact as they sound. And then you've got the Gauls for terrain, the third command with some medium swordsman impact for terrain and to expose things. And then if there is an open wing, it's the strategist. And what I like there is you can put the Numidian light horse javelin very, very wide with the Punic cavalry, so you can turn it into a 4th command. Very
definitely, yeah.
And I think that will split up someone else's, army.
Yeah, and I'm looking at, that last command with just 2 javelin and 3 medium swordsman impact looks, textbook one-dimensional thing, but I'm guessing, does it operate very closely with command 1, so it provides sort of the medium foot for that as well?
Yeah, and I think it sort of like trails behind, but it can move quickly to get around and expose things.
Yeah, and the javelinman, I guess, can drive off enemy skirmishers.
Yeah, exactly, and light horse on another flank.
Okay, interesting. All right, well let's flip to another one now that's on Little Army Designer. So Tamsin, we've got your army list up here, which I'm just trying to sort of start off by comparing it to Dave's, because that's what we've got. So you've ducked the Hannibal, you've ducked the strategist, first person so far. Well done, without resisting that temptation. But talk us through how this all works then.
I really didn't know where to go with this list. It's not a period that I'm overly familiar with the armies of. And essentially, I went and sort of knew I wanted a good infantry block of infantry for 1 command. So I went with 6 African heavy spearmen, 2 javelinmen, because other armies in the period might have elephants, so you want them to deal with, and then a couple of skirmish javelin, light infantry javelin, sort of skirmish out front. I help with elephants, things like that. I had a cavalry command to go on one of the wings, whichever, with 2 heavy cavalry elites, and then 2 light cavalry javelin, and a medium cavalry, all ordinary, just to provide backup punch, whatever. Third command, well, got elephants, and you can take 3 of them. It'd be rude not to, so...
Yeah. This is the mega Death Star, isn't it? The Carthaginian mega Death Star.
So 3 elephants, 4 Spanish scutari, medium sword impact, and some light infantry javelin to screen the elephants.
No, that's all straightforward, doesn't it? That all does what it says on the tin.
Yeah,
Big block of spear.
25 units.
Yep.
I haven't got as much initiative as some of the others, but
Three's still a solid number, I think.
That's pretty good.
I think it's straightforward to do. And looking at it and just thinking on this context of being in period, 2 elite heavy cavalry and 1 medium cavalry and a couple of lights is still a pretty decent cavalry force for in period. Because your challenge with your companions and stuff is you do struggle to get that many of them, and they end up getting pulled into the rest of the army. So looking at all these lists, the more I look at it, the more I think 2 elite heavy cavalry plus a bit of extra stuff is actually not a bad cavalry force at all. It's not overwhelming, but it should be able to hold its own against a lot of other stuff. Your Romans are going to struggle to dish out much more than that on any particular flank.
I was just thinking on the last couple of lists about the mediocre elephants. Are they really going to hit? Because normally when I do elephants, I do elite elephants. I've tried ordinary elephants, and they're very 50-50. So are the mediocre ones just going to hit stuff and then die?
I think in my experience, they either die or they win, really. But because they're quite cheap, at only 10 points each, you can kind of live with them dying. But maybe it's one of those troop types that the psychological effect is greater than they are. Nothing. They still cancel all sorts of factors for other people, and they're a real problem for mounted. Mounted is still not going near those, even if they're mediocre. You're not charging those with cavalry, even if they're mediocre. But I think if you've got enough light foot to keep them uninjured, when they get injured, they're in a real world of problem very quickly. And I think maybe that's one of the things looking at the previous 3 or 4 lists is whether there's quite enough light foot in that command to screen 3 elephants, where there needs to be 4 or 5, and whether they do need to be a bit elite, possibly. Whether it might be.
I would agree with you on that. And sort of listening to the others and their lists, yeah, I think what I probably would do is drop the medium cavalry from the cavalry command
And spend the points on. Yeah.
Elite light foot are always worth having.
Yeah,
I'd almost be tempted to drop one of the African spearmen. Get yourself 8 points, and then
and then that gives me another 2. I was trying to work out the points there.
Yeah, actually, if you drop 1 of the spearmen, you get 4 light infantry in the 4th command, and you can make them all elite. That would be 8 more points, wouldn't it? That might be a tidier way to do it. Then you really are covering those elephants with something quite safe, 2 2s or 2s and 3s and stuff, 3 and a 1. That might be a better way of doing it.
That's probably better, yeah.
Yeah, because you're still doing that. All right, that's a nice straightforward list, and traditional one. So let's have a quick look at. So we got Simon and Andy. Just trying to think. Did you? Yes, you did send me yours, didn't you, Andy?
Yeah.
This is me. Well, let's talk about my list, because I've flicked this up and then I need to dig out Andy's from my email. So this, again, I went Hannibal. You kind of have to. I've got the figure. He's got the beard. He's been seen on the internet, so he does sort of have to appear. It'd be rude not to. And I think that whole...
does a gnome.
Yeah, possibly. Well, I've got his brother as well. But so I went for that whole thing of everybody's got a small cavalry command. Can I get a bigger one for the start? So I've got 2 ordinary heavy cavalry and then 2 elite medium cavalry, because I was just thinking this is more about numbers than it is about quality and punch, because they lack impact. So I thought the heavy cavalry can get away with being ordinary, and boosting the medium cavalry to elite is almost as good. So it gives me 4 pretty good ones rather than 2 really good ones and two filler, and then another 2 light cavalry javelin to make that sort of 6 wide. And I included the general to give them a bit more punch, but I don't think I'd really finish my thought process as to whether he'd be in a medium cavalry or not. You might even decide to mix up 1 heavy cavalry elite, 1 ordinary, 1 medium elite, 1 ordinary, but that starts to get a bit messy, just on that basis of 4 cavalry should be more than most other people's command. And then in the middle with the strategist, with the Hannibal, this was a bit of a kind of dog's breakfast. There's a proper-ish Death Star, couple of impact swordsmen either side of a crap elephant. I've not really thought about upgrading the elite, but having listened to 5 other people saying it's a good idea, maybe I should. So it's a Death Star with 2 medium swordsmen and a couple of light infantry javelin in front of it, and then a block of 4 heavy foot. So 2 of the regular Gallic swordsmen, heavy swordsman impact, and 2 of the Campanians, heavy swordsman armor impact. So this is just 4 stodgy impact swordsmen to go forwards as the second part of this general's command. And at one point I did have an extra medium cavalry in there, but I decided to swap it out for a javelinman. Gives you a little bit more shooting, a little bit more light infantry, chasing off, a little bit of anti-elephant in there. And I thought there's enough cavalry on both the wings to not have an extra one just floating around in the middle. It would give it too much. So it's really 4 heavy foot and a 3 wide Death Star. It's sort of a 7 plus a javelinman in reserve to go forwards, and obviously the Death Star can sort of peel off and work on its own. And then the final one was another sort of, well, a bit of both really. It was 3 heavy infantry, 2 of the elite spearmen with armor, because I think their spearmen are really an undercooked troop type, but if you can give them armor and elite, suddenly they actually do really start to shine and become really hard to take down. So again, both of these are a bit fight toe to toe whilst we try and push around the flanks. So there's 3 heavy infantry, the 2 elite with armor and 1 impact that's Gallic, and then you've got another sort of half-hearted cavalry command with 2 medium cavalry elite and a light cavalry ordinary. And I think that's using the elite to go in there and tough it out against other people's cavalry. Possibly one of the spearmen or 2 of the spearmen support it and try and chase people away, and then just the textbook light infantry javelinmen to screen the heavy swordsman. But whether that's even necessary, given the spearmen have got armor, maybe there's a better way of spending those points, which only still gets me up to an initiative of 3, which is a bit disappointing with the strategist. And I think I probably screwed up by not making the first one competent or something like that. It should really be 4, and it's a fairly small 23, but it's got 3 punchy bits and then a bigger, hopefully bigger than yours, cavalry wing to do stuff on the flanks. Any comments from the from the jury at the top of the screen?
Like the heavy spearman armor elite, they're really good.
Yeah, they're really tough, but I was almost tempted to go with more of them, but they're really tough, but they're resilient, but they're not necessarily a winning troop type. The impact is a bit better sometimes.
They'll stick your line together. They won't break enemy lines, but they'll stick your own line together really well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Going back to Adam's comment at the start, your line, your actual impact troops, you haven't got that many.
Yeah, there's 3 of them there, isn't there? Then there's 3 heavy. No, there's 4 heavy, 5 heavy, and 2 mediums. So there's 7 plus an elephant in that one. It's starting.
You've got 6 impact swordsmen in your centre command. How much more punchy do you want?
Well, Campanians are really, really good as well.
Yeah.
I was just thinking of Adam's comment at the top about if your commands are taken out separately, unless you're keeping command 2 and 3 together, they can be defeated in detail because they'll be overlapped to either side, won't they?
Yeah, but I think those 2 and 3 are together, because what I'd see is that elephant Death Star has got the ability to sit either side of those things. So you could deploy them, heavy foot in the center, Death Star, heavy foot cavalry, or you could move the Death Star to the other side, so the Death Star supports the cavalry command, and then suddenly you've got a block of 7 or 8 heavy spearmen, heavy swordsmen. In fact, 7 of them heavy spear and swordsmen, and the javelinmen and other bits and pieces as well. So it's one of those where you're using the strategist to the command structure you'd fight with isn't necessarily the same as the command structure you'd see on the list, because the strategist can split that command up into two, and it can join up and work with either of the other ones. But yeah, but again, it's just trying to do something a little bit different from some of the more standard ways, and just have a bit more punch. But I think the bit I'd really be looking for, strangely, is that very first command with 4, hopefully more than yours, cavalry to really work it, while there's a lot of different threats in the other 2 commands to soak up people's attention.
Yeah, they'd be forced to peel off to counteract that first command, wouldn't they? Because
that would strip away some of their other things.
Don't have it.
Yeah, that's the plan. So, okay. All right, well, Simon, do you want to talk us through your list? Well, you're on mute, actually. I'll unmute you briefly.
He's gone to sleep.
No, I don't have a list, sorry.
Oh. All right, we'll skip you then.
Simon.
We'll skip you then, Andy. So I then need to dig out.
Scipio you.
Scipio you, that's good.
Badumts.
Okay.
Scipio.
Did I?
Have we got Richard Case's list?
We have Andy's got a list somewhere. I'm just trying to think where I put it. Did you email me, Andy?
Yeah, I sent it from their little army designer.
Okay, I must have it somewhere. We'll edit this bit out.
Sent it last night.
Okay, so that would have come.
Because I realised
last night. Stuff sold on eBay. That's all good. That one.
About 11:30 minutes last night. About that, yeah.
Andy Finkel. Right.
Yeah.
Right, we're on. So, podcast Monday night. We're on. Let's get rid of that so we don't get dinging. So then, Andy, we've got your podcast Hannibal in Italy list here again on Little Army Designer, which at first glance has got about 1 million different troop types in it. It's almost off the bottom of the page. Talk us through this.
Okay. Well, in fact, it's quite similar to your list.
It must be a good one. I'm impressed already.
Oh, thank you. Right. Okay, so if we start with list number 2 in the middle, that's my cavalry command, which has got 3 medium cavalry, 2 elite heavies, and 2 elite light cavalry javelins, and that I think could bully most people's cavalry corps in period.
That would certainly bully yours. My command that's supposed to be bigger than yours isn't bigger than yours in any way whatsoever. Yeah, that's pokey.
Yeah, so I mean, I've had to make the commander unreliable, but if I can get him going, and given that I've got Hannibal as a strategist to kickstart him with some extra pips if I need to, that should most of the time be able to operate quite well and overwhelm a flank of enemy cavalry. Then first corps is the strategist corps, and I've got 3 elite heavy spearmen because I like them. I like the figures, and I've got them, and I like them as a troop type. Well, if they're fighting Roman legionaries, after the first combat, when you're half a pip down because of the quality, you're then half a pip up on them, so that they should stand up fairly well. I've gone for the impact. I've gone for the Hannibal in Italy list, so you get the impact rather than impetuous infantry. Again, I've got the 2 armoured impact Italian swordsmen, Gallic heavy infantry. I've got a medium cavalry just to kind of run around the back and cover blocks there or potentially threaten the flank. Okay. And it's got a medium infantry to hopefully extend the line and go around the back, and 2 elite light infantry shooters. So if an elephant comes along, they could shoot at it.
Okay, so your strategist is really driving a medium swordsman and a medium cavalry to fill in gaps, and you've got a big solid block of some of the best heavy foot in the army.
Heavy infantry, yeah. And then the other command down the bottom was basically a Death Star. I've got 1 elephant, 2 impact medium swords, a javelin man, an ordinary light javelin, and a Balearic elite slinger.
Okay.
23 units.
So that's textbook Death Star, bigger command than yours bigger than yours cavalry command, and a really pokey. But yeah, that's kind of very similar to mine, isn't it? I guess you popped the Death Star into a separate command, whereas I'd used the strategist to effectively have that as a 2-in-1 one. But you've actually got more cavalry in a weighted on that one wing, and you can even send another medium cavalry to kind of join it. I guess you're a bit more dependent on coast because you've only got one cavalry and light horse command there, but possibly.
Yeah.
But then strategist and terrain control, 4 aggression, you can attack as
Yeah,
well.
I've got initiative of 4, so that's I should have a decent chance of controlling what the battlefield looks like.
Okay. Any comments from the gallery?
It's just on third command, and you said you got a javelinman and a light infantry javelin. According to the list that I'm looking at, you got 2 light infantry javelin.
Oh, that's
That's
true,
a
isn't
good
it?
point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something's gone slightly wrong.
Okay.
Probably
You've got more
my
screening light
arithmetic.
foot than more screening light foot
You
than.
could probably make it a javelin. I sort of keep it the list as it is. Javelin, make it an actual javelin, LMI javelin. Then
I could do, but
commands ordinary or unreliable because for points.
Yeah, that might be
then I'd lose out on initiative.
Yeah,
you'd have to make him unreliable, wouldn't you? Or included
Yeah.
would be a bit scary.
I have
No,
2 unreliable.
I think even for me, 2 unreliable generals is asking for it.
My only comment is they got the best army names, best commander names.
Yes. Yes.
Tread of Tyre and Marsupial Platypus Antipodes is quite good.
No, that's all good. That's there.
Yeah, you didn't like my ones then?
I
No,
do miss those.
No, there were some good ones there as well.
Yeah.
Just
Are
trying to think there.
the because of the troop types, the armies that have got 23? Normally, when we've got 23, I'm just thinking it's either we've got a lot more armor or we've got shooty cavalry type, where we're doing the like Ghaznavid type go in, and it's like shooty cav that can evade. So, is it a case that either you go in and you're going to win and it's win fast, or you're going to lose pretty fast, because as soon as like the mediocre elephants take a hit, they're going to go down fast, and then that leaves like that would be one command which is pretty much not much else there. So I'm just thinking, these games will be over pretty fast as soon as they go in. It's not going to be a grind out like some of the medieval ones. Sometimes I
wouldn't say that, Peter, because of my 6 heavy infantry, 5 of them are armored.
Well, that's just it. Because you're 23 units, I could effectively mitigate the 6 heavy armored guys and try to, kite them a bit and focus on the rest.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I've had that happen to me before when I turned up with a bunch of heavy spearmen with armor, and the guy just kited me around the table, and I didn't actually manage to get a hit in. I'm just saying about the experiences that what's happened to me before, that they didn't even worry about that. They just didn't go anywhere near him.
I think that's maybe where the in period theory comes, because there's not really those sort of skirmishy light horse armies in this period. Everybody is sort of geared around a bit of straight up and fight. So you're actually looking about your heavy spearman armor taking on pikemen or Roman legions or something in this period. It's a bit harder to dance around. And also, I don't think 23 is a bad number. I'm starting to go your small at 20, 21, 19 even. 23 is decent. I think 29 is enormous. That's real top end of whatever it is. That's a vast army.
I think 23 is good and 25 is large. 27 and 29 is
You're trading quality for quantity, aren't you there?
Yeah.
It's starting to get outrageous. Okay. So I think if we look back... Go on.
Can I just suggest when the lockdown does end, because the Central London one-day competitions, a set up for a one-day competition of you can have a period of Carthaginian armies allowed. Carthaginian. I think it's definitely possible. I think if we look, there was 6 or 7 or 8 armies there, and we've got. I think most people went for Hannibal in Italy. Because armies allowed Hannibal in Italy.
But I think most people went for that instead of having the impetuous. I think, was it Peter? You used the impetuous ones in a slightly different thing and used the strategist in a different way.
So instead of the clones for the Order 66, we're doing the Order 55, the Death by Carthage.
Death by Carthage. But it's 2 different ways to use the strategist.
If you want to have a load of elephants, if you want to have more than one elephant, you've got to go for the Hannibal not in Italy.
This means war.
So coming up now, then we've got a new feature because we've been in lockdown for about 7 or 8 weeks, and I think we're starting to find ways around this. So I think this is a new bit of, has anybody actually done any gaming this week? And I think, Andy, you've done something to orchestrate Dave playing a game somehow in some sort of complicated way with your campaign.
Yes, right. The campaign. I was asked by Dan Hazelwood to explain this. So here's a picture of the map we were using to
That's
campaign.
Brilliant for radio, Andy. Brilliant for radio.
Oh, I thought you could video this. Right. Well, okay. For those watching in black and white, it's the southern Germany map from Blücher, or in Inaki's case, the northern Germany map until facts of life were told to him. Basically, what happens is you've got a grid of 8 by 6, and each square has got terrain features on it. For the purpose of this campaign, each player had 4 columns running around, and each had to be in a different square. 3 of the columns equated to cores in their ADLG army list, and the other one was a dummy. So when they actually got to a situation where a battle could be declared, each core was in a different square. Now, that didn't mean that when you came to fight the battle, you had to split each core into a different sector of the battlefield, but it did define how they set up as between, which was left, right, centre.
Okay.
Yeah. The terrain in the map determined what the terrain features would be on the table. Dave managed to pick the most crowded part of the world ever, which had on a battlefield about 11 bits of terrain. So given that the maximum you'd normally get in an AGLG game was 9, I had to cut it down a bit. But the idea was, if there was a built-up area or a wood or something on the map, that would find its way onto the table, and then you might just have less choice as to what else you put down. And then an ADLG battle broke out. Dave had 29 units, Inaki had 25. The way campaign works, whoever's holding the most terrain, village and town points at the time, will win the campaign unless their army is broken by the enemy during the course of the battle. So since Inaki was holding most of the terrain, Dave had the onus of breaking his army and came pretty closer than I thought he would. But in the end, impetuous Viking medium foot just carved a swathe through mediocre Feared, and that was basically the end of that.
All right. Okay. So this game was played. I think you talked about this a little bit, Dave. You were participating in the strategy and the actual game. So how was that in terms of playing a game sort of by remote control?
So I think Andy's idea is we're refighting 1066. So it's I'm Anglo-Saxon against Vikings, and on the Blücher-based campaign situation, we ended up with a river in the middle of the table, which was really funny because that corresponds with Stamford Bridge, and that worked really well. I think Andy's idea of doing each turn with sending us photographs on WhatsApp was quite good. And then we could sort of like issue orders to him. So, I mean, at the end of the day, Andy was doing all the legwork. He had the table out in the living room. It gave it a bit of a fog of war effect because you were sitting there looking at the photographs. You weren't quite sure how far before, you wanted to go forward and things like that. I thought it worked really well.
Okay. So, and then I think, Simon, you and Peter are supposed to be getting involved in the next stage of this battle once you start pulling lists and things together.
Yeah, so the part of it would imply that I could actually do a legal list. So other than minor details like that.
Well, you did send me a list, and I made some observations on it, and then you said, "Damn, I should have looked at the Norman list," which I think is probably one of the last things Harold may have said.
Yeah, to work out what they could have had, what troop types they were involved in.
Watch out for the bowmen.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So, anybody else managed to get any kind of gamey type stuff in? I think, Peter, you've been playing a little bit with Tabletop Simulator, haven't you?
Yes, I pulled it down and had a look at what Massimo's done, and several other people have been looking at Tabletop Simulator. So basically, it's taking the Art de la Guerre setup and trying to simulate it on this sandbox environment. And they've actually set up various troop types. I haven't managed to have a full game of it yet, but there's about 8 or 9 actual armies on there now. So including a generic one, which would keep Simon happy, which would suit his sort of medieval Germans quite nicely, so he can get some heavy metal on the table. But it looks quite interesting for lockdown. So I'm going to have a try at that by the next podcast and try and pull the different things down, and also see what it's like to actually try and create some troop types, because I wouldn't mind having a go at some Normans in Sicily, just because, why not?
Yeah, no, I've downloaded it as well, and I think it's the instructions or the instruction videos are quite hard to come by, and I think it's one of those things that's supposed to be intuitive, which means we haven't really got instructions for it. But if you're about under 20, you just kind of get it. I think it's feeling my age with computer stuff, but I think I'm nearly there. And I some guys on one of the old Yahoo groups have explained to me how that you wheel bits of units, but it looks very doable. The idea that you can kind of grab your mouse and pick up a dice and hurl it across the table and it rolls and stops and stuff like that. Everything's got proper physics. So I think there's definitely some mileage in that. So maybe we'll have to offline kind of exchange ideas.
List.
Yeah, we'll have to try and work out just see if we can shove some troops around and see how that works. And I think the other thing I actually managed to do at the weekend was with that 10 mil French was to split it into 2 halves and do the first few turns of the initial scenario of Battle Empire, because there's a scenario in the rulebook, in the Napoleonic rulebook, of 2 equal forces of about seven units of infantry and about 3 units of cavalry on each side that you can go through. And I think it's really interesting. Just I don't know the rules at all, and I don't particularly know how the period works, but just to play it out, the rules are structured that the base set of rules is you roll some pips, you move things forward, they shoot, they take hits, they take casualties, and it just works through those mechanics. And then there's another layer on top of the rules of orders and orders giving and higher level command that you don't have to play with initially to get the basics, but that then informs or constrains or forces you to do certain moves on the tactical level. But the first scenario, it just says play the tactical level, don't play the orders based thing. So I kind of rolled through that, and it was actually very playable. There's some very simple factors. You're rolling opposed dice, and the big thing I think we've all been chewing around on the WhatsApp group is about base widths and base sizes, and my troops have got a mix of 3 centimeter bases, which is a 6 centimeter wide unit, and 4 centimeter bases for an 8 centimeter wide unit. And honestly, it made no difference at all. There wasn't a time at which you were able to concentrate huge amounts of fire or do anything complicated, because one unit shoots at one unit and returns fire. You're rolling a d6, you've got some extra base factors on top of that, and an extra shooter is just a +1. So and it's not a quite normal opposed shooting like in Art de la Guerre. You get a total score. So maybe your base score for shooting is 2, you've got supporting unit 3, you roll a dice, that gives you 7. You look up on a chart, and 7 is equivalent to a certain amount of damage or a certain reaction on the enemy. So it's not, shooting isn't an opposed score where you're adding up the difference. So even if one of my sides had all 3 centimeter basing, the most it ever would have done through squeezing in would be possibly less units would exchange fire, and some of them might have been at a +1. But then at the other end of the line, the wider opponent would have overlapped them and got that benefit back. So I really thought that, because it's all one combat on one combat, when they charge in, it's one at a time. Supporting units are behind, not necessarily an overlap. And oh my God, you do need supporting units behind, as I discovered, because when you get repulsed, if you don't have friends to fall back behind, you go bloody miles. and you're never coming back to the battlefield, which is a nightmare. And I also found out that Napoleonics isn't the same as Ancients, which is a bit of a shocker. Who knew? You know, different tactics and all sorts of stuff. So I tried charging. I didn't quite get the artillery because there was only one artillery unit per side, and I never kind of really got it doing much. But you know, I kind of, my good troops, they shot the enemy, they did a little bit of damage, they charged in, and then I found out that steady troops receiving a charge in line get like loads of pluses for the shooting as you come in. So my unit, who were thinking, oh, we've got a little opportunity here, let's pile in and take it, got absolutely hammered and sent back. But the move distances seemed all right on a normal ADLG size board. The 30 mil, you know, movement things. I'd even did some strategic movement where you can move a division or a corps or whatever it is, like a group of units, a command, multiple times as long as it stays out of tactical range of the enemy. And I kind of went round the flank and tried to attack myself from one side. And so you could move a reserve quite a lot, quite easily to redeploy things once it starts to reserve. But in that weird thing that ADLG seems to do with the small table size, that actually has a lot more benefits than you think. Whilst you can redeploy a long way, and you think this could be a game of dancing about, because the table is actually quite small and shallow, whilst you can redeploy, you know, around the table, you know, like 20 times 3, redeploy something 60 centimeters or more. The enemy is into tactical distance, which is 24 centimeters, pretty bloody quickly, because the table is only 80 across. You start 10 or 15 in, you move a couple of times, and then there isn't room on the table, you know, along your base edge to do those big redeployments very, very swiftly in the game. So I was actually really impressed with the mechanics, and I think, you know, I'll give it another go and get the mechanics down a bit more pat.
So perhaps that's one that we do when we do come back in, and try and do a one day of sort of like experiment day where we go in and try out some different scenarios.
Definitely think so. Yeah, and I won't have bought the 10 mil Brits by then at all. I promise. I won't have bought them. I won't have painted them. I'm not looking at them as we speak on another screen here at all on the Pendragon website. It's really not happening. Really not.
I was vaguely thinking of getting a 10 mil army. I wasn't sure whether to go for Austrians or Russians.
Well, you know, I would, because I only know blue and red. I would end up getting Brits if I get a second one, which I won't. I will never do that. I won't do that. I won't
so next week on the podcast is
painting. Yeah, Tim's painting project.
He's what I purchased recently.
Well, one other thing though, on the tabletop simulator, there's Battle Empire there as well.
I spotted that, so that may be the answer. That may be the answer to give that a go, and try that. But
while you're painting your blue,
probably another go through. Yeah, another go through with the basic rules, and then I will start trying to overlay the strategic orders sort of thing on top of it, which I think would add quite a bit. But you know, the basic mechanics seem to work, and stuff moved, stuff shot, stuff attacked, it fell back. It was kind of neat. So actually, some real soldiers moved on table this weekend.
Well, you sound very positive about it, and that's good.
No, I was chuffed about it. I was pleasantly surprised, given I didn't really know what I was doing, which is possibly like some of the poorer quality generals in the actual historical period. Yeah, I'm almost up to American Civil War standards of incompetence and not knowing what was happening in that one.
Yeah, you Stonewall Gnome.
Stonewall Gnome, indeed. Okay, then. Well, I think it's that we're cracking on. Time is ticking over, and it's time for Andy's quiz, which is the moment which we all look forward to, mainly for the music, but sometimes for the questions, and definitely for the answers from last week. So I think we're now into Andy's quiz. Andy, this is your bit. Off you go.
Right. Last week, the question was all about known truths, and it was
known truths
by Napoleon.
I thought you were talking about gnomes. Are you obsessed with gnomes here? No.
It says the man who's painting them.
Exactly.
So I gave you 3 quotes by Napoleon, using the word blank for one of the words from the quote, and you had to work out what the blank was. So the first one was, in politics, blank is not a handicap.
Been a difficult week for us to answer that without getting into a lot of trouble, hasn't it, really?
Go on, go for it.
Knowledge.
Talent? Intelligence?
Stupidity.
Stupidity. All right.
Right, next one was, blank is a sleeping giant. Let her sleep, for when she awakes, she will move the world.
Russia?
China.
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 Oh, Napoleon knew China.
Two.
Wow.
Yeah. And the third one is, you don't reason with intellectuals, you blank them.
Execute?
Blank.
No, blank. Shoot.
Shoot.
It's close with execute.
Close, Tamsin. Close.
Get close. We'll give you 50% of the points there. Okay, then.
Yeah, very good. Right, so this week's quiz, the theme is famous last words. Which famous characters from military history are reputed to have made the following statements just before they died? First one quotes, to the strongest, unquote, in response to the question of to whom he was bequeathing his empire.
It can't be Simon Miller, can it? The author of... No, he's still there, isn't he? Still producing.
Well, I didn't know he had an empire, but
yeah,
anyway.
I think he does. It's somewhere in Muswell Hill. Yeah.
It's obviously a powerful one. Second one is, aim at the heart, not the head, said this person to the firing squad he was facing.
I think I know that one as well.
And the third one is, quote, they couldn't hit an elephant at this distance, shortly before he was shot by an enemy sniper.
Okay, good set of mystery quotes then. Brilliant. Well, I think that gives us on to next week, and the only thing to do is cue the music. Right, so we've survived the music, we've survived the quiz, we've survived the questions, and we've survived nearly till what feels like the early hours of the morning with this podcast.
2.5 hours.
Far too long. We'll edit some bits out and put.
But that's about 3 episodes, isn't it?
It's about 3 episodes. It's exactly.
Paintbrushes, Carthaginians, all the other stuff.
I think we're going to do it. It's all going to be grand.
Netflix mini-series at this point.
Yeah, once we start releasing the video, that will get really tricky, won't it? So I think just to go around and say what's on the painting queue this week, and if I start with my top left, Mr. Simon, what have you got coming this week?
I have a bucket load of 7-Year War Austrians and Swedes to be painted up.
And what are those figures like? You know, we talked earlier at the very beginning of the program, sometime last year, that you've got a load of stuff from LKM. What's your general impression of them so far?
They're surprisingly quite nice for the price point. They're quite cost effective, and when you start looking at the detail on, so I've got a bunch of the grenadiers and the artillery and all that, and they're quite nice. You can see lots of detail of the belt, the ammunition, the big hat and all
miters,
that. So I've got there might be miters, the big black hat they had. I think they'll paint out quite nicely, and I reckon with a bit of army painted dip type of technique, aka my only way of painting, I think they'll come up really nicely at 3 foot.
Okay. You're still, having seen the figures now, still going white undercoat and go it that way.
Yeah,
that's definitely the answer. Okay, well, it'll be interesting to see how those have gone during the week. So, Andy, what's next on your list of more Huscarls?
No, we're Huscarled out. We're out to the fair, so hopefully I'll make some progress with them. I've got 50 figures, all various colours of block painting at the moment, and I might even have finished some by next week.
Excellent. Okay, and Adam, you and the family, are you still shipping? Or are you doing other bits and pieces?
Other bits and pieces, hoping for two things. Firstly, is doing some Lord of the Rings figures. because part of the lockdown thing is I'm reading Lord of the Rings to my children, and it takes a lot longer to read it out loud than it does reading it yourself. But we're halfway through Two Towers, so I'm going to paint up the Fellowship of the Ring because I've been tidying up my cupboards and discovered a Lord of the Rings box game thing that I bought, I don't know how many years ago, because I love Lord of the Rings, never painted. So I'm going to paint that up for the kids. And I'm also going to paint up some 20mm Russian World War II tanks on the theory of why only collect World War II stuff on one scale.
Excellent. What manufacturer are they from? Are they precasts or
They're,
plastics?
I think they're plastic, PSC, plastic soldier
Plastic soldier company. They're the kits. They're the simple kits.
Quite easy to put together, but look quite nice. So I'll be them together.
Okay, one piece tracks, isn't it, on those ones?
It's like there's about 5-6 pieces all together in a kit.
And are you going to do black undercoat? You're going to undercoat them at all? Just go straight with the
I'm
green?
undercoat. I've got some army painter Russian green.
Fine.
And that's the undercoat. So the painting is the tracks and the detailing and a mud sort of dry brush.
So you'll be lurking around the bottom of your garden, confusing the neighbours then with the spray can.
Oh, always.
Yeah, as always. But that's just general. That's just nothing to do with the painting. That does happen. So Dave,
are you going to paint the black blobs on them to show where the German shells have gone through them?
No, these are just ISUs. German shells don't go through these.
Not ISUs, not at
Oh,
all.
right. Oh, serious one.
Proper
Right.
heavy stuff.
This means war. This means war.
So Dave, will you be done with your camels and?
Well, I think having sat here for 2.5 hours doing this podcast, the camels are almost finished.
Oh, okay. So you've done next week's painting already?
No, that's not true. I've actually stuck 6 of them onto 2 bases this evening. So Simon Finney wanted me to explain about some basing, so I'll take some pictures of my stupid way of doing that for him. Send it to him. The camels will be done. Hopefully the Fighting 15 black banners will arrive and we'll be going to finish the samurai. And then it's start to look at, I know what I've got this prize thing. Well, it wasn't a prize. It was like, it was a castle on an 80 by 40.
Okay.
Which I've sprayed black.
Mm-hmm.
Which that might be quite funny to paint up as a medieval camp.
You're going to get a Rapunzel figure, kind of, and have someone climbing up it.
Yeah. Can you see it from there? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a little tower, isn't it? It's a tiny little tower.
It's
The one from Spain.
Yeah, you made in Alicante.
Ah, it's a bit like the lighthouse that I did.
It's
then.
exactly like the lighthouse.
Right.
So
Okay.
that needs to be done, and then yes, it's the Ottomans after that.
All right. The long put off Ottomans, and then Tamsin, I think you said earlier you're finishing off more of these mounted figures.
Yes, and 4 foot figures for command bases. That should be done within the next couple of days. Just leaving the basing to do for them. So at that point, I'll switch to something else. I was thinking sort of the Judge. Moving on to starting painting the Judge Dredd figures that I've got, but I'm actually now thinking that I might make a little bit of terrain up just so I can do some games of Strontium Dog. Some solo games.
Wow, Adam, you're nodding. You're a 2000 AD man?
Well, yeah, I loved 2000 AD when I was a kid. I know all about it, but it's just the Judge Dredd figures. The only one that I've painted is playing Malifaux. There's a guild character called the Judge. And as far as I'm concerned, there was only one character that's going to be called Judge. So in Malifaux, my Judge figure is actually Judge Dredd.
Yep.
Steampunk thing. Okay, that would be a change for us to have a chat about next week. And then Peter, I think you said second half of the Austrians.
Yeah. So I'm doing my East End Austrians. I'm onto the Geezers.
Yeah.
Geezers, Jaegers, and the Grenadiers to bomb them all out. So all the ones with a bit of colour in. So they're not all totally white. They actually allowed a bit of sort of blues, greens, and I've even got some land here who have some very funny hats and top hats and sort of slouch hats. So it's like the Austrian Australians. So all makes it a bit more interesting. But I've got various ones coming through the post. So hopefully I'll have built out the Austrian army. It's my sanity grasp of lockdown with the Austrians.
Okay, so and that will definitely take you beyond the end of next week then.
Well, yes, because I've got some more on the way. So that's going to keep me for the next couple of weeks. So I might actually pick up a side project just to keep me going and make me doing something other than just Napoleonics. I just haven't quite worked out what it is yet.
Okay.
It might be World War II tanks or something to be a little bit different. But I've also got some boats to put together as well from the Cruel Seas one, the motor torpedo boat. So if we've got a bit of nice weather, the spray can's coming out.
All right. Okay. Well, I think hopefully the weather.
Could I nudge you, Peter, into doing that army list?
Yes.
That's the other thing you're doing, isn't it? Yeah.
I've got that. I've got the tabletop simulator to do, and in between I still work. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. There's 6 witnesses. You are going to do that army list this week. That's all.
Yes.
You're now caught, and then there might be at least some people listening by the end of this podcast as well who will
Maybe
hold you
we
to
could do
account.
this in parallel, because maybe I could do the miniatures thing, and maybe you could try doing the battle on tabletop as well. See how it goes.
Yeah, we could give that a go, possibly.
Well,
Okay.
there's the I think there's Anglo-Saxons, and I don't know about Normans, but I know there's Anglo-Saxons and Danes on tabletop.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
I think
Viking ship has sailed, unfortunately.
Yeah, possibly. I think for me, I've nearly got these M&Ms Mondrian Swiss nearly finished. I think I've got a Scottish-Irish gnome, which is my last gnome to do, which involves a bit of sort of kilt-based colouring. Look, I've no idea. I got forced into it. It was a good idea at the time. I'm sure my Irish-Scottish army will
Beers were had, were they?
be very grateful for that sort of thing.
And what gnome is it, Tim?
This is sort of Anglo-Scottish-Irish one. It's definitely wearing a kilt and something like that, but it's got it's going to have very, very ginger hair, I believe. I'm just trying to work out what to paint the hat and other bits and pieces. So but I don't think that's going to take a week. I think the Swiss are very, very nearly finished as well. And then it is that difficult decision about what to do next.
It's that British Army in 10 mil.
Yeah.
I can hear the bugle call.
No, I'm almost tempted to. I think the Hungarians in 15s might do well, because I've got the 28mm Arabs, and I'm not sure it's going to be a good enough spraying painting week to just wade to fill like enormous vast surfaces with 28mm plastic Arabs, and I might also have to get some more liquid poly glue before I wade into that. So my other 15mm army to do is Spartacus, and that's such a good project. I almost feel like, having done the French Napoleonic, I feel I should do something a bit more bog standard in between and kind of save Spartacus, because lockdown's clearly going on till the back end of the summer, isn't it? To all intents and purposes. So I don't want to peak too soon and do all the fun stuff and have nothing left to look forward to. So I think, I'm saying it now, I'm going to probably have a go at the Hungarians, which will be, they'll be nice, they'll be pretty. That'll be a straightforward army, and then if that can put off me buying the British Napoleonics, which I'm not going to get for a while.
Sorry, Tim, what Hungarians?
It's 15mm medieval Hungarians. I've got Essex Hungarians.
Black Army, sort of like.
Yeah, Matthew Corvinus, all the medieval, the Clipiati and the Szekler's and all those other bits and pieces.
What did ever happen?
Yes, I know. I keep asking about that Hungarian army, but apparently it's still a loved family heirloom. So, but one day that will come back, and that's a whole other story for a whole other podcast, I think. Probably filed in a different category, possibly. But Lucy, if you're listening, well done for surviving to the end of this one. And we do all still think about those Hungarians. So that's probably a better note to end on than we've managed for the last few weeks. So thank you all around the table for surviving, and good luck with the painting next week. Good luck with everybody having a go at Tabletop Simulator. We might actually end up, if that does work, playing some games and not even having enough time to do this, which we probably don't really have enough time to talk for as long as we have done this time. And we'll see how we go. But there'll be more of these coming up. Thank you for listening. Thank you, everybody, for taking part. Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Good night.
Good day. And we'll leave you and stay safe out there. Goodbye.
Bye.